Imagine a world swallowed by emerald green, a labyrinth of rivers and impenetrable jungle. 500 years ago, a Spanish conquistador, Gonzalo Pizarro, driven by the insatiable thirst for gold, dared to venture into this uncharted realm. But the Amazon, ancient and unforgiving, would become his tomb. Sound of cracking branches, the buzz of insects, and the murmur of a hidden river rises as the camera sweeps across the Amazon canopy. 1541. The promise of El Dorado, the legendary city of gold, beckoned Pizarro and his men. With a force of hundreds of Spaniards, thousands of indigenous porters, and a vast train of horses and livestock, they plunged into the heart of South America. Little did they know, they were not embarking on a triumphant conquest, but a descent into hell. This is the story of Andes' apocalypse, the army that ate its horses, shoes, and survived. A tale of unimaginable suffering, where ambition clashed with the brutal realities of the rainforest. Over the next chapters, we will witness a descent into madness, fueled by starvation and disease. We'll unravel how Pizarro's once proud army was forced to consume their horses, their leather, even the very soles of their boots, to survive. We will examine the decisions that led to this catastrophe, the individual acts of courage and betrayal, and the harrowing choices men make when pushed to the absolute limits of human endurance. Prepare to confront the devastating power of nature and the darkest corners of the human soul. The quest for gold would cost them everything. 1541. The echoes of Francisco Pizarro's conquest of the Inca Empire still reverberate through Spain. A younger Pizarro, Gonzalo, driven by the same insatiable hunger for riches, sets his sights eastward beyond the Andes. The prize? Not gold this time, but the mythical land of cinnamon, a region whispered to possess untold spices and perhaps even El Dorado itself, the legendary city of gold. Imagine the aromatic allure, the power held by controlling such a valuable commodity. This wasn't just exploration. It was a fever dream fueled by greed and fueled by the promise of surpassing even his brother's infamous exploits. With the king's blessing and a ravenous ambition, Gonzalo Pizarro embarks on what he believes will be his own golden chapter in the annals of exploration. Little does he know, the fragrant dreams of cinnamon will soon turn into the bitter reality of starvation and unimaginable horror. The scale of Pizarro's ambition is reflected in the sheer size of his expedition. Over 200 Spanish soldiers, clad in heavy armor, form the core, a force hardened by years of conquest. But they are not alone. Thousands of indigenous porters, ripped from their homes, bear the burden of supplies, their fate inextricably linked to Pizarro's hubris. Countless horses, the symbol of Spanish power in the New World, and herds of livestock are driven forward, intended to serve as a mobile food supply. This is not a mere scouting party. It is a full-scale invasion of the unknown. Initial morale is high, fueled by Pizarro's promises of wealth and glory. The clatter of hooves, the shouts of command, and the heavy breathing of the porters create a cacophony of anticipation, an army marching towards its own destruction. The snow-capped peaks of the Andes give way to a suffocating green. The Amazon rainforest, a world teeming with life, but also with unimaginable peril, now engulfs Pizarro's force. The jungle floor is a labyrinth of tangled vines and treacherous roots, hindering progress at every step. Torrential rain becomes a constant companion, soaking clothes, rusting armor, and turning the earth into a muddy quagmire. The air hangs heavy with humidity, breeding disease and sapping the strength of even the most seasoned soldiers. But the physical challenges are only the beginning. Hidden predators lurk in the shadows, jaguars, snakes, and swarms of insects, all contributing to the oppressive sense of dread that begins to permeate the expedition. The dream of cinnamon is slowly being choked by the reality of the Amazon. With the jungle proving almost impassable, Pizarro turns to the rivers, hoping they will provide a navigable pathway deeper into the Amazon. Makeshift rafts are constructed, groaning under the weight of men and supplies. But the rivers are far from benevolent. Treacherous currents and hidden rapids threaten to capsize the rafts at any moment. Men are swept away, swallowed by the murky depths. The constant fear of drowning becomes a new psychological burden. The river, once seen as a potential salvation, now reveals itself as another deadly enemy. Each mile gained is paid for an exhaustion, fear, and the growing realization that they are utterly lost in a hostile and unforgiving landscape. Weeks bleed into months, and the carefully calculated food supplies begin to dwindle. The livestock, intended to be a reliable source of sustenance, are either consumed or lost to the jungle. The indigenous porters, already weakened by the harsh conditions and heavy burdens, suffer the most. The hunt for edible plants proves fruitless, as most are either poisonous or offer little nutritional value. A gnawing hunger begins to spread like a disease, turning men against each other in a desperate scramble for survival. The once proud soldiers, driven by visions of wealth, are now reduced to haggard shadows, their eyes hollow with starvation. The realization dawns: they are not conquering the Amazon, they are being consumed by it. In a desperate attempt to find food, Gonzalo Pizarro tasks his lieutenant, Francisco de Orellana, with leading a smaller contingent downriver to scout for settlements and supplies. Orellana, a seasoned explorer in his own right, accepts the mission. However, as Orellana and his men float further and further downstream, the temptation to abandon Pizarro grows. The river offers a potential escape route to the Atlantic, a return to civilization. Faced with the agonizing decision of loyalty versus self-preservation, Orellana makes a fateful choice. He continues downriver, effectively abandoning Pizarro and his men to their fate. This act, forever shrouded in controversy, seals the doom of many and marks a turning point in the expedition's descent into hell. The unthinkable becomes the inevitable. With all other options exhausted, Pizarro makes the agonizing decision to slaughter the horses. These magnificent animals, symbols of Spanish dominance and vital for transportation, are now the only remaining source of protein. The act is not merely practical. It is deeply symbolic, representing the utter collapse of Pizarro's grand ambitions. The soldiers, who once rode these horses in a battle, are now forced to butcher them, their faces etched with a mixture of guilt, desperation, and relief. The taste of horse meat, once unimaginable, becomes a desperate craving. But even this grim solution is temporary. As the horses disappear, so does the last vestige of hope. With the horses gone, the pangs of hunger return with a vengeance. Desperate to quell the gnawing emptiness, the surviving members of Pizarro's expedition resort to the unthinkable, consuming their own leather. Shoes, belts, and saddlebags, anything made of hide, become a grotesque source of sustenance. The leather is boiled, roasted, and gnawed on, offering little nourishment but providing a fleeting distraction from the unrelenting hunger. This act of desperation mirrors the increasing decay of the mind as men begin to hallucinate and retreat into delusions to combat the trauma they have endured. It also speaks to the increasing levels of delusion and the erosion of what's needed to survive. Lies are told amongst the ranks to keep hopes alive. This is the beginning of the end, the death of the self. But the jungle held more than just starvation and disease. Gonzalo Pizarro and his men weren't merely battling the elements. They were trespassing on ancient lands. From the Quijos people near the Andes foothills to the tribes deeper in the Amazon basin, the indigenous populations viewed the Spanish as invaders, despoilers of their ancestral homes. The Spanish army, already crippled, now faced constant, unseen enemies. Poisoned arrows whistled from the dense foliage, claiming lives with agonizing slowness. Ambushes, brief but brutal, became the norm. Entire supply trains vanished, swallowed by the jungle, courtesy of native ingenuity. These clashes weren't just military encounters. They were cultural collisions, misunderstandings amplified by fear and desperation. Imagine Pizarro's frustration, already driven to the brink, Now confronted with a foe he couldn't even see, a war waged not with steel, but with silence and stealth. Every rustle of leaves, every shadow, carried the potential for deadly attack, further eroding the morale of the already broken conquistadors. The dream of El Dorado was becoming a nightmare fueled by relentless resistance. Months bled into each other, each day a mirror of the last, filled with suffering and death. But even in the deepest darkness, a spark of hope can ignite. Slowly, painstakingly, the remaining survivors began to adapt. They learned to identify edible plants, meager though they were, supplementing their dwindling supplies. The jungle, once a suffocating prison, began to reveal its secrets. As they pushed further east, the terrain gradually shifted. The oppressive density of the rainforest began to thin, offering glimpses of open sky and a semblance of navigable land. This wasn't a sudden transformation, but a gradual easing of the suffocating grip of the jungle. Reports from foraging parties came back with increasing amounts of fruit and small game. While starvation was still a constant threat, the immediate danger lessened. The men, though skeletal and plagued by disease, found a renewed sense of purpose. The realization that survival was possible, however slim, infused them with a newfound energy, fueling their continued march eastward, away from the heart of darkness. August 1542. After nearly 2 years of unimaginable suffering, the remnants of Gonzalo Pizarro's once proud expedition stumbled back into civilization. The scene that greeted the inhabitants of Quito was one of utter disbelief and horror. These weren't conquering heroes returning with tales of gold and glory. They were ghosts, mere shadows of the men who had marched into the Amazon. Emaciated, their bodies ravaged by disease and starvation, their clothes reduced to rags, they bore the unmistakable mark of living hell. Less than half the original force had survived, their eyes hollow and haunted by memories of unimaginable horror. Some were completely incoherent, muttering about things no one could comprehend. Others wept openly, unable to articulate the horrors they had witnessed. Pizarro himself, once a proud and ambitious leader, was a broken man, his face etched with guilt and despair. The return of these ghostly remnants was a stark and brutal reminder of the folly of ambition and the unforgiving power of the Amazon. The dream of El Dorado had been replaced by a nightmare of unimaginable suffering, a tale that would forever be etched in the annals of Spanish conquest. The quest for El Dorado ended not in a golden city, but in a wasteland of despair. Of the thousands who embarked on Pizarro's expedition, only a fraction limped back to civilization, their bodies and minds forever scarred by the horrors they had witnessed. Andy's apocalypse has shown us the devastating consequences of unchecked ambition, the brutal power of the Amazon rainforest, and the extraordinary lengths to which humans will go to survive. This ill-fated journey became a stark reminder of the limits of human control and the futility of greed in the face of nature's overwhelming force. It forever changed the understanding of the Amazon, exposing its dangers and hinting at its hidden wonders. But more than that, it serves as a chilling testament to the resilience and the fragility of the human spirit. Pizarro's expedition stands as a potent symbol of both the audacity and the folly of exploration. While some sought glory, others merely sought to survive. In the end, the true cost of ambition was not gold, but the lives and sanity of those who dared to chase a phantom. The jungle remembers, and so must we.